Good evening. Welcome to Crossroads of Ideas for the month of November. My name is Laura Heisler, and I am the Director of Programming for the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, Director of Outreach for the Mortgage Institute for Research, and Director of the Illuminating Discovery Hub at the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery, which means I'm connected to all three of the organizations here in this building. And all of these organizations collaborate to bring you the Crossroads of Ideas series. The idea behind this series is to convene conversations between campus and the community on subjects that matter to all of us in our daily lives. I like to say it's more front page than science page, but there's always a scientific component. We always want to make sure that we are bringing issues that are important to all of us that are also the subject of groundbreaking research here at UW-Madison. And so tonight's presentation is very much in that spirit. I'm going to spend just a couple minutes giving you some basically housekeeping notes for how this evening is going to go, and then I'm going to turn things over to a colleague who put the event together, who in turn will introduce the moderator of today's session. So I do want to mention that we have one more session coming up this semester, and that will be on December 10th. On personalized cancer care. So this one is definitely something that would be on the science page, could also be on the front page, with Melissa Scala from the Mortgage Institute for Research here in this building, and Dustin Deming from the UW-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health. And if you got an email for tonight's event, you'll get an email for that one. If you didn't and you would like to get emails about this series, you can sign up on the sign-up sheet just right out front. We do record all of these, and we'll make the videos available on the discovery.wisc.edu website in a few days. You can search under videos and find all of the Crossroads of Ideas sessions. Because we record the talks, we do ask that when we get to the Q&A, which we will, and we'll hear a little bit more about how that's going to go this evening from our moderator, we do ask that you raise your hand and wait for one of us to reach you with a microphone so that we can capture your question for everybody here, but also helps us capture it for the video. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Gavin Luter, who is the Managing Director of the University Alliance. Gavin had the vision for this evening's program and put it all together, and he's going to give you a little bit of context and then introduce this evening's moderator.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Gavin Luter. I'm Managing Director of the University Alliance, and I wanted to tell you what that means and what it is that we're trying to do with the Alliance. Basically, University of Wisconsin-Madison is a very large bureaucracy, and a lot of people who are working with issues of concern to local government oftentimes don't know each other. So take, for instance, transportation. We have people from civil and environmental engineering, planning and landscape architecture, sociology. The University Alliance tries to be a place where a lot of those people can kind of meet and start to know each other across the university. So it's kind of like an internal networking group. But we manage a program called the University Year, where basically local governments can ask us, how do we tap into the resources and expertise of UW-Madison? And then we connect them with courses, and students take on projects that local governments identify and work with them over a 3-year period. So that's called the University Year. You can definitely look up our website, University, University, see what we did there? It was trying to be kind of cute and clever, but it usually just means it's a little confusing for people. But it's university.wisc.edu, so you can find out more there. But what we wanted to do was showcase the variety of people at UW-Madison who are working on the transportation issue. I definitely think if you have not seen this on the front page, you have been blind to this issue, and you've had your eyes closed, because this is totally something that a lot of people have been talking about, especially in the city of Madison. With the wheel tax, and I'm sure, who knows, we could definitely get into that. But this is a front page issue that's not only garnered local attention, but also attention from across the state. So to do that, we are going to invite a great panel of people, but I wanted to introduce the moderator and give him a little bit more of an extended introduction. David Noyce is the Arthur Hahn Professor of Transportation Engineering and was recently for 2 terms the chair of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering here at UW-Madison, and currently serves as the Executive Associate Dean for the College of Engineering. He holds a joint appointment in the Department of Industrial Systems Engineering at UW-Madison and is adjunct professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, interestingly enough. Dr. Noyce has over 34 years of experience in transportation engineering, including state government, private consulting, and academia. He currently serves as also as the director of the Traffic Operations and Safety Lab at UW-Madison. The TOPS lab has over 40 research professionals conducting research in the areas of traffic safety, traffic operations, information technology, freight operations, ITS, connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and product development. Dr. Noyce also leads the Wisconsin Driving Simulator Lab and directs the UW-Madison partnership in the SAFER SIM University Transportation Center and the Wisconsin Connect and Autonomous Vehicles Proving Grounds. Who knew that was going on at UW-Madison? I certainly didn't until I got to know about David Noyce. So David, welcome to the podium.
Got it. Good evening, everybody. So thank you for that nice introduction. I think it was a long-winded way of saying I've been around a long time now thinking about transportation issues in the state of Wisconsin. So what we're going to do tonight is a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to invite, we have 4 panelists that you can see up here on the screen. I'll introduce them one at a time. I'm going to ask each one of the panelists to give a 5 to 10 minute introduction about some of the things that they're thinking about and some of the different transportation issues that may be of interest to you as well. When we get done with each one of those 4 presentations, I'll invite the speakers to come up and then we'll have an open discussion with any questions or things that you would like to have us discuss with you. Does that sound like a good idea? Okay. We will, so I guess let's leave it with that. We'll get to the question and answer details when we get done with each one of the presentations. So what we try to do is set it up in general from a national perspective, if you will, down to a local perspective, and we'll talk about some of those issues as we go along as well. So let me introduce our first speaker. So Robbie, if you want to come on up. So Robbie Weber is a senior associate with the State Smart Transportation Initiative here on the UW campus. So Robbie.
Thank you.
While you're flipping the slides.
So I'm going to talk really fast. SSTI is a network of reform-minded DOTs. This map is actually out of date. One of the reasons I was tapped to do this is because our director and deputy director are in Denver right now with the CEOs of the DOTs that we work with. And for the first time, we have somebody from Wisconsin. We do not have Craig Thompson, but we do have one of his designees, so we need to add Wisconsin to this. The states change depending on what is going on in each state and who wants to work with us. So that's the first thing that we do is we get these CEOs together for an executive level community of practice once a year so they can chit chat amongst each other in a very personal way about shared issues. We also do technical assistance with states that we work with, and we're a resource for the larger transportation community, so you can go to our website and see some of our resources, our blog posts, our webinars, and things like that. So what issues are DOTs facing? Well, some of these will look familiar. Funding. We've been funding transportation in the same way for, since the 1930s. And the gas taxes is just it's not working, but nobody wants to raise taxes. Vehicle miles traveled fees might be a more sustainable way to fund transportation, but people tend to be suspicious of them. Sustainability is not just environmental sustainability, but economic and social sustainability. Safety, fatalities for occupants in vehicles are going down, but fatalities for people outside vehicles, pedestrians and bicyclists especially, is skyrocketing at the same time that they're going down for people inside the vehicle. And infrastructure is definitely a part of that. Project prioritization. How do we decide what we are going to fund? Who makes the decision? How are the decisions made? What are the criteria for deciding what projects are going to be funded? And the changing expectations for transportation and mobility. How are DOTs going to adjust to that? So this article came out from The Hill, which tends to be the more conservative of the two blogs that cover Congress. And it came out just last week. They said, we have not changed the way we think about 3 things forever. We still mostly prefer a solo commute, almost always in cars. We pay for infrastructure the same way that we did in 1932, and we still accept roadway fatalities as a price for mobility. So this is something that is being discussed on a national level, and I was really pleased to see the Hill bringing that up. So what do we do at SSTI? So the short version is we encourage fewer and shorter car trips. Doesn't mean people don't drive. It just means you don't drive as far, and hopefully you don't drive for every trip. And we do this with we work with the states on project prioritization, accessibility, demand management, which we are calling modern mitigation, and under that, parking and induced demand. So project prioritization is, what are you funding? So 2 states have really taken a proactive view to say, we're going to be very transparent about how we make these decisions, and we are going to put those criteria out there, and all the projects are going to be ranked, and then you're going to get a score, and we're going to say, this is how much money we have, boom, that's what we fund. No political input, no arguing, no, my area didn't get anything, and fix it first. Can't put an addition on your house if you have a leaky roof. We all know all the roads in Wisconsin are falling apart. Why aren't we fixing those before we expand them? Okay. And one of the things that we're working with states on is accessibility analysis so they can decide which projects to do. And the accessibility analysis, accessibility is not ADA accessibility, it's can people get to the places they want to get to. DOTs focus a lot on how fast the traffic is moving. How much congestion is there? How slow is the Beltline moving? But really that's not important. It's how fast can you get to places. If you're not on the Beltline congestion is irrelevant. Can you get there walking, biking, by bus? Driving a different route. The speed of travel is one of the most important things, and if things are close together, that you can get there faster as well. So we help states look at the prioritization of projects by doing accessibility measures. And then modern mitigation or demand management, often it is much cheaper to not have people getting on that road all at the same time than it is to expand the road. Trying to get everybody to continue to move at the same pace, at the same time, every day, for every trip, is a losing proposition. This is called induced demand. The more you build, the more they come. You can't build your way out of congestion, and even if you have smart streets and AVs, there will still be too many cars on the road because people will choose to drive when they have a chance. And parking, if you give them free or cheap parking, they will drive. One of the ways to mitigate traffic or manage traffic is to price parking and make it more flexible so that it has dual use, so that it's not just daytime or evening use. It's used on weekends and things like that, and price it at its real cost. So people make the choice and then give people alternatives for driving. So we have a report that we did for Los Angeles, and we're also working with Madison on this, called Modern Mitigation. So when you build a new development, instead of expanding the roadway, you find ways to mitigate that traffic without necessarily inducing more people to drive. The thing in the lower corner here is a map of parking in Hartford, which one of our deputy director, Chris McAhill, did his dissertation on, and he's one of the top parking experts in the country. It's how much parking, how much surface, valuable urban land is given over to parking. So it's an urban design issue as well. So that's it.
Thanks, Robbie. That was excellent. So our next presenter, I'm proud to say, is my colleague in the Traffic Operations and Safety Lab, Dr. Jon Riehl. So John will tell us about some of the things he's working on.
All right, so this slide set usually takes me about an hour to do, so I condensed it into 4 slides, and we're going to crank through this. So there's a lot of information. Really what I want to talk about is the term ACEs, which is Automated Connected Electric and Shared Vehicles. So really, I believe, and our group believes, that the next 15 years in transportation will be more transformative than any time in our history. So you're going to see highly automated vehicles, not fully autonomous vehicles, but highly automated vehicles. They're going to disrupt transportation in a lot of different ways. Downtown cores and interstates, for a couple of different reasons, will be where you see that first happening. Crashes will decrease, which is a good thing, but they're not going to be completely eliminated. They will change in their, maybe they'll change in their manner of how they're happening, and we need to look at and prepare for what that'll look like. Really, the transition offers many challenges and open questions. So you can see the Venn diagram in the top right. I have connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, electric, and shared vehicles. Connected on the top is really where we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, seeing more and more technologies where we can connect not only the vehicles themselves to other vehicles, but to infrastructure and to bicycles, pedestrians, and anything else. That really gets into the idea of Internet of Things. Autonomous vehicles, what everyone wants to talk about, and that'll be here in some varying capacities over the next 10 years. But a fully autonomous vehicle that you can go buy and will drive you everywhere is a ways off. Electric vehicles also something that these autonomous vehicles, we often think they're going to be electric, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Forces are going to drive it to be the case that these will probably be more electric vehicles, but not necessarily in the next 10 years. And shared mobility also, I'll leave that to some of other speakers to talk in more detail about, but sharing more rides on automated vehicles versus just using them for yourself, or we're worried about the single passenger vehicle. What about the zero passenger vehicle when these things are going from point to point without anyone in them to go pick someone up? So that's something to think about too. So really, how do we get there? Advanced driver assistance systems are being developed and heavily marketed by car manufacturers today. Probably the most common one you see a commercial for is the forward collision warning, and not just the forward collision warning, but the automatic emergency braking when there is a forward collision imminent. We could get into, I don't really prefer how they're marketing that, because they're showing people being completely distracted and then, oh, this thing saved me. And I really think we need to get away from the point that cars are going to save us from ourselves. And you can see in the bottom left there, this information came from the National Safety Council along with University of Iowa. They said, you are your car's best safety feature. That's going to be the same thing even in the next 10, 15 years. The problem is the car's going to do a lot more stuff for you, and people are going to get lazier. So if you've heard of these levels of automation here, I won't go into detail again because I could take 20 minutes on just that, but I will say current vehicles are in this SAE level 1, which would be they have some sort of system on there. They might have the forward collision warning, they might have adaptive lane keeping, adaptive cruise control, features like that. A level 2 would be something like a Tesla that combines multiple of those systems. So when you do autopilot, which is also a bad marketing name because it's not autopilot, it's a really, really good cruise control that keeps you in your lane and at your speed, and it can speed up, slow down for vehicles in front of it. It works well if you're using it appropriately. All the way up to your level 4s, which would be vehicles that can drive themselves in a certain operational design domain, but not everywhere, wherever you want. And that can vary pretty widely from some of these shuttle vehicles that are actually on what's more like a virtual rail system, where they're just following a path that's pre-designated, to vehicles manufactured by a company called Waymo, which spun off from Google, where they can geofence an area, and anywhere in that area they drive dynamically in the lane based on their algorithms. So biggest issues surrounding automated connected vehicles, why we're actually thinking about this stuff here at the university, the research involved, what do we need to look at? Complex driving situations. So level 5 is really the holy grail of automated vehicles. The reason we're not going to be there anytime soon is there are complex driving situations that are difficult for even human drivers to do, and will be difficult for us to get automated vehicles to do. One example is passing, if you're in a rural 2-lane highway, passing a bicyclist. In the state of Wisconsin, it's legal for you to actually pass the bicyclist over the double yellow. It's not legal for you to pass a farm implement. However, most of us in traffic safety would argue if you do it at the right time, it's still probably actually safer to do, right? So some people still do that. I'm going to go quickly through some of the rest of these here. Vehicle cybersecurity, obviously a concern. There's a lot of work being done with blockchain and computer science on that one. Information privacy, so with connected vehicles are talking to everything, and you've got all that information passing. Vehicle ethics, so what do vehicles do in no-win situations? Crash worthiness, so if vehicles no longer have to have a driver, everyone can be pointing at each other. That changes the whole dynamics of crash testing and modeling. System disengagements and re-engagements. I mentioned drivers already have a tough time with their phones being out while they're driving, leading to more crashes. So what's going to happen when their vehicle drives for them most of the time? They're going to get even more distracted. And we've already seen crashes with Tesla where that was the case. Deep learning artificial intelligence. So this would be systems that actually are figuring out how to fuse the information together and make decisions for the vehicle. Vehicle assertiveness. So just one example, if these things were really passive, we could stop a roadway full of autonomous vehicles as a pedestrian. And I guarantee every student will learn that really quickly here on University Ave. Fault tolerance, fallback, making sure we have really redundant systems like on aircraft. Legal liability issues, crash data. And then user acceptance is a really big one too. And equity kind of goes along with that, as well as job change and loss. So last slide of mine. So what we did here is we started what's called the Wisconsin Automated Vehicle Proving Grounds back in 2017. And this was a partnership between the university and then some other sites, including MGA Research, which is a closed course test track over in Burlington, Wisconsin, where they do a lot of work with crash dummies. Road America is involved as well, kind of more on the marketing side in the sense that they've got a lot of people dealing with the auto industry coming there. We have our driving simulator, which was mentioned in Dr. Noyce's bio, where we're doing a lot of work on humans and their interaction with automated connected technologies. We have a simulation-based engineering lab where we're simulating a lot of this work. We've had automated shuttles here on campus. The plan is to have more of those as well. This year, we've got our connected vehicle corridor, which is on Park Street, where we're testing the connected vehicle technology. And the video is just going through some of the signal phasing and timing that you might see. There's some more advanced intersection things in the middle there. I know you can't see all these, but we're doing a lot with advanced intersections that can actually figure out where pedestrians, bicyclists are before the car gets there and send the car that information and vice versa. And then there's obviously a lot of partners involved too in the process. So that was the way too quick version of that, but hopefully I gave you an okay overview. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. So our next speaker is Carrie Mcandrews. Carrie is a professor in the Department of Planning and Landscape Architecture here on campus, and her area of research and expertise is in fact in transportation. Excuse me. So Carrie? Yours.
Hey everybody. Yeah, you guys are looking good out there. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, sound is good. Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me to join this esteemed panel and this wonderful audience for the Crossroads of Ideas event, which is appropriate for our topic. So I'm a transportation researcher and educator, and my area of focus are the social and public health outcomes of the transportation system. So I focus mainly on transportation planning, policy, and design. And I'm honored to work with Union Cab on a project, and this is the project that I'll present this evening. So working with Union Cab, our goal is to figure out how to eliminate transportation barriers to jobs by redeploying or deploying traditional taxi cabs in a novel way. What I like about this project is that it takes traditional or existing elements of the transportation system and rearranges them in order to solve a social problem. Very good. Thank you very much. And so we're motivated really fundamentally by some values that we have. The value of work and the value of quality jobs. And we have those values sort of personally and organizationally, but we believe that if we work toward those values, we can deliver to help families and entire communities. So if I were a young entry-level worker in Madison, living on the southwest side, I might be interested in having a job, perhaps in DeForest or in Windsor. I might want to consider working at the Walgreens distribution center or at the new Fleet Farm that they have there. And if I were to check Google Maps to find out how I might get to my job interview, this is what I would see. I would see that there's really no service going there. And this is the same sort of message that I would see if I had a third shift job and I could take the bus to my job one way, but not on the way home. So those are the problems for workers. But this isn't just a problem for individuals. This is really a collective problem. It's a problem for society. One of the biggest challenges that we face as a region is how to plan and implement a transportation system. Thank you very much, 5 minutes. How to plan and implement a transportation system that links all of our dispersed residents with those employment and other opportunities that are also dispersed, right? So how do we get people how do we find transportation that can help get people to wherever they need to be in the region? And this is a really vexing problem. You know, despite being very well served by public transit, especially in the urban core of our region, we still have about 70% of workers in Dane County traveling by car to their jobs. And so what about residents who don't drive or who don't have cars, who choose not to have a car or for a medical reason don't drive, right? So not driving or not having access to a car is a fundamental challenge, obviously, to accessing work. And this is especially true when one tries to access work in the suburban areas, which happen to be where job growth is fastest. And this is also where it is most difficult to provide cost-effective public transit. So that's really the dilemma. I have notes, so I might stay focused. It's not always easy to stay focused. So these transportation and land use issues, right? So what is sort of a problem of our development patterns and our settlement pattern create a time-space problem for us, and these are our transportation problems. But these transportation and land use problems are also an economic problem. Businesses say that they cannot expand in Dane County because they can't access enough workers. Okay, so this is the project. So with Union Cab, the Union Cab Commute to Careers program essentially has a central idea that workers and employers share the value of the commute. Okay, and so what we're looking for is a commitment from employers to invest in that commute travel. Right? The goal is for employers to essentially pay a share of that travel, and for riders to also pay a share, and to operate this sort of shared ride taxi service using traditional taxi cabs sustainably with minimal grant support. Right? And we know that employers will pay for transit passes. We know that they pay for parking. They won't necessarily pay all their workers for parking, but they definitely pay to supply it. Right? But so what about other types of services? So this service has been operating since December 2018. We have some months of operations data and know that 81 people have been served with over 2,100 rides. The rider copay was $5 per ride. The average distance was 7 miles, and the average time for each of those rides was 12 minutes. So what are the next steps? So we've learned really that the service is needed. We actually have a lot of demand from riders, and we have a lot of interest from employers. We don't have enough employers investing though and paying for this service. But we think that we can organize employers into transportation management associations, either by location or by sector, to help solve their workforce transportation issues by coordinating shift schedules, identifying riders, and even coordinating childcare and some other supporting services. And we think that this organizational piece is the next part of this program. And by organizing the employers a little bit more, we hope that we can achieve the scale that we need to have a higher share of shared rides. And right now they're about 2% of our rides, maybe 5%, very, very small. So those are our next steps, and that is what we're going to be working on in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Okay, our fourth speaker and our last speaker before we get to the panel is Dr. Yang Tao. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Yang, I've had the privilege to know for a long time. He was a student of ours here at this great university, and now has gone on to do some great things as the city traffic engineer in the city of Madison. All yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Noyce, and good evening, everyone. A few months ago, a group asked me to give them a talk on transportation and sustainability. It was the night before. I have an hour after work to work on some slides, and I was tired. I don't know where to start. So I went to the kitchen office trying to get a cup of water. Over there, I noticed that day's Wisconsin Journal was lying on the kitchen table, and that picture, front page picture, grabbed my attention because I was just there with my 2-year-old daughter that weekend. So she had a nice time playing with the water on a hot day. That's Wingrove Park Beach. But a lot of people suffer from the heat and other extreme weather events. Without climate change actions, this is going to continue. We're going to see more extreme weather like this, such as heat, flooding, and others. So where we are today. So here is a really quick global view. Right now, there is 1 billion cars on this planet. And by 2050, we expect to have 2 billion instead of 1. 70% of the fuel energy is lost in the engine. So we're terrible at efficiency. And transportation is responsible for 23% of the energy-related greenhouse gas emissions. Still, there is 1 billion people on this planet does not have access to a paved road. As those regions grow, they demand access to automobiles as well. And locally, we're facing a lot of challenges as well. The Madison area is the fastest growing area in the state of Wisconsin. You have seen lots of things are going on, lots of buildings are going up, lots of people are moving in. However, though, we have a really challenging isthmus area to find all the traffic through. And in the 1950s, this community, in my opinion, made a very wise decision to reject the freeway going through downtown. But that means we don't have that option. We have to rely, on these small streets in this area to move all the traffic, accommodate all the growth. Our population is also changing. The population is getting older and more diverse in terms of color and income level. So how to ensure we deliver equitable transportation access to our population is going to be a challenge as well. So we have to rethink about a lot of things. First, we have to rethink about the space. So this diagram shows different by using different mode of transportation. By using one standard 11-foot traffic lane, how many people can we move through in 1 hour? For traditional personal-owned vehicles, we're looking at 2,000 vehicles, 2,000 people, with about 1.1 person average in a vehicle. For bus, we can move 9,000. Bicycles, 14,000. And if we look at the BRT, that's a rapid bus transit, we're looking at 20,000 to 43,000, depending on what kind of buses system we use. And of course, as we move to rail, the potential is even more. We also have to rethink about the impact. So this diagram shows that by emitting 1 ton of CO2, how much people and miles we move, kilometers we move. Of course, our 2 own legs are the most environmental friendly way to move around. Actually the bicycles are not that far apart from it. The BRTs again are doing really good, and other transit system. Surprisingly, the scooters, the mopeds, are the worst. They are so inefficient. So in Madison, we realized that we really have to promote a lot of, walking, biking, and transit use to get people out of single occupancy vehicles, so that we can really have a better future, for locally and globally. So the city has been working on that. Over the years, we have built a pretty walkable downtown. It's really as one of the best in the Midwest, but we still have lots of missing links. And as we get, off the downtown area, it's getting very challenging. So we still have a lot of work to do on that part. We are also very highly ranked in the biking world. We have awesome bike community here. We have a lot of ridership, but we have to move forward on more progressive things, such as protected bike facilities, so that we can get all different kinds of people on their bikes. We have a pretty good transit system in downtown area, especially in the campus area. However, though, we have a lot of things to improve as well. In September, 2 months ago, Mayor Sacha announced a major transit improvement package called Metro Forward. So we're looking forward to doing a lot of things, like implementing our first BRT system, have another set of facilities for Metro Transit. So there's going to be a lot of investment in those fronts. And we have been working with the development community and the businesses on how to manage our demand. We want to accommodate growth, but we want to do it in a way that we don't all have to rely on driving. So 2018, the city approved a major development here farm side, city's near west side. That's the largest single development project in the city's history. And we were able to work with them, require them to set up the first Transportation Management Association in the city, which requires everyone in the development work together, contribute to it, to promote walking, biking, and transit. Lastly, I've been working with a team of city agencies, UW, and a lot of community partners on how to make our city smarter. So we developed a plan called the Building a Smarter Madison for Shared Prosperity. The idea is that we want to use more data analytics. We want to use more technology, such as connected vehicle technology, autonomous vehicle technology, and others, to make our system more effective, smarter, so that we can accommodate more growth with existing infrastructure instead of building more. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang. All right, so let me go ahead and invite the speakers to come on up now. While they're doing that, it's time for questions. So loosely enforced rules, there's really no rules. Just simply ask you to keep your questions kind of short and to the point. The microphone will come around and get you there. And we'll try and get as many questions in as we can over the course of the next half hour or so. Panelists, I'll try and identify who would like to answer the questions, and there's no need for everybody to respond on questions if it's not necessary. We'll try and move it along as quickly as we can. All right, we have our first hand. Yes, sir.
All right, that was okay. Well, first of all, thanks to University Alliance and Wharf. This is a great subject to talk about. We're in an interesting building. Just behind the panelists, we've got 4 lanes of high-speed vehicular traffic, and just that way where they're looking, we got 4 more lanes of high-speed vehicular traffic. Personally, I think it's bananas to bisect a university campus with an 8-lane highway, but I'm not an expert. So I'd like to hear your point of view on what you would do if you had complete carte blanche to change that.
I'll take that. Well, first of all, I would put a BRT lane. I would take a lane of car traffic and put a BRT lane. I would put protected bike lanes on both roads. And then if the BRT is still full, then maybe take another one. But basically the first thing I would do is turn some of the traffic lanes into transit exclusive lanes, plus put protected bike lanes on, going both directions. Because right now we have a protected bike lane going eastbound, but not westbound. Well, no, I mean, there's a curb protected bike lane on University Avenue, yeah.
Yeah, there actually are a few things that's in the works. I'll stop at there.
Yeah, so we're on microphone, so we should be able to hear, but I will restate it quickly. And I don't plan to do it unless somebody can't hear. Okay, so the question is, if we could do something different with the 4 lanes of University Avenue and Johnson on both sides of the building, what is it that the panelists would do? So, Dr. Tao, given this is your bailiwick, what are you going to do?
Okay, yeah, actually, I hope that I can just stop over there by saying that there are a few things that actually the cities has been working on. Actually, Robbie is right on that we want to prioritize transit through the corridors. So we're looking into actually some plans that probably too early to discuss at this point. Put an emphasis on transit both. Sometimes it's physical right away. Sometimes it's allocation of time. Give a transit priority when they pass through traffic signals, for example. We are also looking, working with university actually, on some of the, long-term options, redoing, for example, University Avenue, Johnson Street. So I think in the future, streets might be very different from today.
Can I just stir the pot with one quick comment? I think you might like it. So it's so interesting. So this road, right, carries about 60,000 vehicles a day, and it's in the place where it carries the most traffic, down by University Bay, kind of on the west side, which is kind of about the same amount of traffic that is on the Beltline Highway on the south side of town. So what would you rather be next to? This environment or next to like a large freeway? They both carry the same traffic flows.
You're right on. Yeah, actually, University Avenue and East Washington Avenue are the 2 busiest non-freeway arterials in the state of Wisconsin. But the top 2 are in Madison. That's University Avenue and East Washington Avenue.
Okay. So yeah, let's.
Thank you.
So you got a microphone there? It's over there. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to go back to this interesting question of the difficulties, which certainly do exist now as far as people getting to work, particularly in outlying areas. What about, how much of that problem is caused by municipalities that won't pay for bus service within their jurisdictions, or simply just don't want bus passengers moving through or within their jurisdictions, which I think are both serious problems? Is a regional transit authority the answer to dealing with these recalcitrant municipal areas? Thank you.
Okay, so without repeating the entire question, should we think about different ways of suburban type transportation and perhaps a regional transportation authority?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a first shot at it. I think probably some other experts as well here. That's a great question. So our RTA, that's Regional Transit Authority, is a very helpful mechanism to put that together to make sure that the region can plan a transit system that makes a lot of sense. Instead of stopping at the city boundaries, it goes to places really connected, right? People with jobs. However, in the state of Wisconsin, unfortunately, RTA is not allowed. So we don't have that mechanism. But as you see, if you notice some recent advancements in this region, City of Madison actually started providing transit services to Sun Prairie. So we are definitely working with surrounding municipalities to make that happen. Without the help of the former RTA system, but I think it's a challenging road.
Anybody else want to? Carrie, you want to address that?
I was just going to say Wisconsin's the only Midwestern state that does not allow RTAs.
You're right. The issues that you raise, everybody, this is a complicated problem, but we do need to address it, and we need to come up with the governance, the funding, the methods, and the planning to do that. Yeah, it is a regional problem. It requires a regional scale and maybe even a state scale way of thinking that would be better than what we have now.
All right, great question. So the next with the mic.
Hey, you know me. I live in Madison, and I love Madison, but when I was listening to this panel, I thought, this panel's so Madison, you know? We're talking about biking, walking, bus rapid transit, smart and connected vehicles. That's great. But when you look at the front page issue, this was about like how our state funds highways, basically.
No.
That's part
Transportation.
of transportation broadly, but people are talking about crumbling roadways and all this kind of stuff. So I'm kind of wondering if the legislature called you up, well, let's just say a bipartisan group called you up and said, what kinds of policies should we be thinking of advancing at the state level to think about a long-term sustainable transportation solution? What in the real world tomorrow, if they called you, what would you tell them to do?
All right, so what would you tell your state legislator on a transportation policy issue to move forward? Maybe we'll have each panelist provide one. Robbie, you want to start?
Sure. And I'm really thrilled that WSDOT is now attending our meeting, because maybe they'll pick up some ideas from other states. And I think it would be to fix it first. Fix the roads that you have before you build new. Forget about expanding the capacity when you can't even take care of the roads that you already have. There's a lot that I would tell the legislature or the DOT secretary, but that would be one that I think would be relevant to the entire state.
John?
So what I would say is that technology is a lot cheaper than building extra lanes, kind of going along that same vein. While you're either rebuilding or repaving or doing a new traffic signal, make sure you're getting this connected technology in there, and also other intelligent transportation systems. Because as a percentage, it's a very low amount, but we can actually, if we have this connectivity, we can attack the mobility and safety issues that we have a lot more efficiently.
Really good ones. It's jargony, but it's helpful. It's called to design the transportation system for 8 to 80. In other words, to think about the travel needs of young people and older travelers, and to think about all users in the transportation system, designed for independence, designed for independent travel.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be the same, kind of along Carolyn's point. I will advise the state constantly moving more aggressively towards complete street framework. So design the facilities for everyone instead of very auto-centric.
Very good. All right, next to the mic right here.
As a very long-time resident of Madison and now living in Middleton, I've watched transportation get worse and worse in Madison. And I live on Century Avenue, where that big corridor that goes on the north side of Madison, of which they were always talking about how they're going to make 4 lanes out of that so that people could come in. I was just and there's a huge development going on. So when large developments happen around in the outlying areas, buses then go out to those areas? Do they find that the people who are moving to those areas would be using that kind of transportation? And so therefore, do they make plans to do that down the road when those developments come in? There are times down along that area where you could be waiting in stop traffic from Allen Boulevard, Century Avenue, all the way to Westport at rush hour on the way home. And it's not getting any better. And just one other aside too is I wonder if anybody's ever thought that, during the daytime, people don't park in church parking lots. They don't park in park parking lots. Could those not be places where people could park at either a reduced amount of money and maybe give some, the churches could be making some money, or even the city could too, if there were huge parking areas like where the ball places on Warner Park, where people could park in those and then get transportation to come into the city, thereby, keep in those outlying areas, keeping people from having to come in so far with their cars.
Yeah, good question. So, Yang, why don't you start on how you work with the local communities or neighboring communities on these major new developments?
Yeah, a great question. So the city of Madison, actually, we are very mindful about the large developments, and they will be encouraging them to, do more. We call, transit-oriented developments, TOD. So we would like them to, locate where they can be served by transit. But when they cannot, the city, would like to provide transit services to more areas. But however, given our current limitations, we can only house so many buses in our garage. So right now that's the limiting factor. So the city has initiative to kind of expanding that bus storage capacity, so we can provide more service. Actually, the area you mentioned, Central Avenue and Boulevard, that's actually in city of Middleton. Actually, the city of Madison lost a lot of developments to them, like Costco, largely because we imposed a lot of more conditions on them, such as transit considerations, parking limitations, things like that. But in terms of the parking demand control, I think that's a great idea. Also, trying to set up some unofficial park and ride outskirts of the city and encourage them to park and ride a transit system to downtown. That's something that we're trying to encourage.
Anybody else want to comment?
Well, I was just going to say that what you're talking, I'm going to sort of talk about this on a more broad scale and not just about that particular area, and not even just the Madison area, but what we worked with Los Angeles on, and other cities in California are doing similar things, is what we're calling modern mitigation. So it used to be that if you built a development, you had to mitigate the expected traffic by, say, adding a lane or a turn signal or something like that. Instead, California now has a law that a new development, it used to be that it could not degrade the level of service on the adjacent roads. Now, if they are going to add to the vehicle miles traveled in the area, you have to do mitigation. So the mitigation is now not widening the road, but providing other things so that people can get around without driving. Bus passes, car sharing, bike sharing, shuttles to the transit stops, all kinds of things that will help people get around so that it mitigates and cuts down on the amount of traffic. So that's one of the things that we're working on with a lot of cities around the country, and it was driven by this new law in California. And the parking is definitely something else that we are looking at, and that is that instead of having individual parking lots for each use that might only get use at peak times, the baseball game, the top shopping day of the year, when the bank is open, whatever it may be, that you share this parking, and you also charge for the cost of it, whatever that cost may be, and then maybe get people to stop driving at the edge of the city and then get on transit.
So we do have a number of low-cost or no-cost park and ride opportunities here at the university. The challenge is getting people to use it. And parking is free. So still the percentage of people that are willing to accept that service is quite low. So.
Hi. My impression, having been involved fairly intensely in pedestrian bicycle transit advocacy for about 10 years, is that a lot of the kinds of thinking that go on at the university and among policy types is based on the premise that people out there are basically amoral, self-optimizing, self-centered automatons. Very low expectations for citizens. A specific example, my impression of the majority of motorists is that they either have a right to drive or have a right to have no choice but to drive, but have no obligation to experience transportation, what transportation is like for people living where they live, who can't drive, who can't afford a car, who don't have family or friends to chauffeur them, or just plain don't want to drive everywhere for everything. And I realized that taking on that mindset is an enormous challenge. And yet, also is my impression that if we do not confront that, what you can do with policy and technologies is very limited. And one specific...
What's the question?
Comments. Are you willing to get, I would say, are you willing to get out of your comfort zone and put more out there along the lines? Don't expect technology to save you. You know, what you were talking about, sir, with smart cars, there's a big danger with that, and I was really glad to see you talk about that. And I think that, okay.
Good comment. We need to change the culture as well.
Can I start with them?
Yeah, quick response.
Yeah, really quickly. That's where the future can be what we make it. Autonomous vehicles could actually become a large problem if we decide that we're going to act individually and, you know, instead of parking where it costs a lot of money, we're just going to have it circle a building while we're at an event for 2 hours, right? So policy is going to need to change, which means mindset's going to need to change, and that's a very difficult thing. So the incentive structure really is what you have. So I was going to answer the other gentleman's question here by saying actually block off the roads and have only shared use vehicles in the downtown core and make people stop and take a ride share in. That's a really bold idea, but we need to get to where things like that happen, or else those people aren't going to change, right? If you haven't, it's really relatively low cost for those people to make that decision right now. If it costs them $2,000 to park downtown a year, maybe they'd change their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, John brought up a point that I feel like I must have to provide a follow-up on is the technology. For example, the self-driving technology. It can be the best thing ever happened to us, or it can be the worst thing that ever happened to us. Really depends on how it evolves. For example, we all heard about the benefits of it, right? Provide a lot of equity accommodations for people who cannot drive, seniors, disabled, and very convenient, save a lot of time, very safe. On the other hand, if we are abusing the technology because it's cheap, because it's convenient, we might decide to move away from a city because houses are cheaper. We come to work. I don't care. It's a 2-hour, 3-hour drive. I just sleep in the vehicle, or I can work in the vehicle. Like a pizza store downtown would not want to pay the rent on State Street. Instead, they have a vehicle just driving around, and whenever somebody order pizza, just deliver to that person. Even retailer like Gap. Why do I have a store on downtown? I'll just put all the clothes in the truck, driving around. When somebody wants to buy clothes, I drop it off, you choose it, put the rest back on, and drive to the next customer. When that happens, there's going to be a disaster. So I think these type of engagement events is very important because we need everyone to be engaged in that decision-making process. If we leave this only to the hands of a few, especially the industry, they have certain kind of a social conscience, but they have their bottom line to care for the most. So we really need the government set a good policy. We need the research institutions to do the research, and we need the industry to collaborate, and we need the public, every one of you, to be involved in that decision-making process, so we can choose a road that's going to be work out of in our favor in the future.
Okay, where's the microphone? Jonathan.
So one thing,
Yes,
I
sir.
want to mention something before we go on. Sorry. It's 8 o'clock, and ordinarily we are really good about ending right at 8, but I know that this group, the panelists, have agreed to stick around a little bit longer. So if you are expecting to leave and you'd like to leave, please feel free to do so. But I believe the panel is going to stick around for several more minutes and take a few more questions. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Okay, so I have the microphone here. So Jonathan Patz, Nelson Institute, Global Health Institute, and the School of Medicine and Public Health. So you know where my question's going to come from. And I'll just quickly mention from John's answer to the last question, many cities in Europe, Oslo, London, Madrid, other cities are disallowing single occupancy vehicles, and they're putting up strict car sharing or big taxes to drive in the center. So that's already happening. My question is, according to the World Health Organization, 5.3 million people die every year from physical inactivity. And I'm wondering, in your designs, are you factoring health as one of the outcomes as opposed to just moving people around? What about how people are moving around that may promote health? And a follow-up similar question regarding the technology of autonomous vehicles. I do worry, I'm sure you've had this question a million times, about hacking into systems that are so reliant on computers.
So who wants to address the first question first?
Maybe I'll give a crack at it, and others can add on to it. So in terms of public health component in transportation, that's a really good point. I don't think in our profession, also generally in American culture, that has been very popular or has been really considering our profession. I kind of have a unique background with a lot of research background, as Dr. Noyce mentioned. So I have been during my my career, I've been involved in a lot of research on public safety, how the active transportation can really help solve our problem. So I totally realize that, but I don't think at this point the public is informed on that, and also the profession, our profession as a whole, has been factoring that in the decision-making process. So I definitely hope that we can do more of those. In one sense, I kind of hope that for our projects, maybe public health professionals can weigh in on some of those as well. So great point.
John, you want to talk about the privacy issue real quick?
So cybersecurity is a concern. It is a concern already for vehicles that are new. This will just be yet another vector. So cars today, for instance, I bought a car last year. You can log in right now on a smartphone. If you were to hack my password, you could start my vehicle, right? And that's not a vehicle that is actually autonomous or connected in the sense of the technology. It's just connected via 4G. All the time. So there is that vector already, because if you can get through that to the CAN bus, which is what controls the vehicle steering and everything. So what I will say is it's a serious concern that people are spending a lot of time to solve. So that's where distributed systems like blockchain systems, where you actually are putting that on the edge and not allowing people to actually get through that as a vector. With any cybersecurity issue, there's always someone who can hack everything, right? But I think having a lot of redundancy in the system and making it really, really difficult where it's not your primary mode or vector that you want to use is the answer.
Where's the microphone? Right there. Yes, sir.
I just have a question. If somebody could speak to bus rapid transit, know nothing about it, doesn't seem very novel to me. So what's the play? I mean, I see some of the data, but it just doesn't seem that novel. So what's the sales pitch on it?
Do you want to know why we're doing bus rapid transit? Because it's cheaper than rail. That's pretty much it. It's cheaper than rail and can be done faster.
Also, you are right. BRT is not something new. It has been there for many years, and I think a lot of people confuse that with regular bus system. So the idea actually about BRT, I think as Robbie mentioned, that it's cheaper, it's much more efficient than the rail system. Actually, if you want to get the funds from FTA right now to do something, they're probably not going to support a rail project. They're going to support BRT project for that reason. Second reason is that we need a whole spectrum of transit services. So we need regular buses stop very frequently, so people don't have to walk that far to get a bus stop. We also need something that can get people from this side of town to the other side of town quickly, so that you don't have to spend 2 hours each day when you get to work. So that's the idea for BRT. Good question.
Just want to add one thing, and that is that I think that anybody who puts in BRT and doesn't make it an exclusive lane for the buses is wasting their money. That's my opinion. But I think that we have to have exclusive lanes because then the bus can move faster than the rest of the traffic. If we don't do that, I don't know if we should. I know that the city's not going to do that right away, right? But I think that's a big mistake.
Uh-huh.
And that goes back to the first question, which was, what would I do? And not just transit priority lanes, but transit exclusive lanes, where you get on and off and you never have to deal with mixing with cars. So.
Oh, I got a question over here.
Yeah, I like this talk about BRT. I think there's more to it than, I think there's probably some good public discussions you should go to because there's a lot there for BRT. My question is regarding congestion pricing, what your thoughts are as far as how it's been implemented in other countries, and I think New York is going to experiment with that, and what the prospect would be for doing it here in Madison. Thanks.
Robbie, you want to go first?
Yes. I think that New York has got the advantage of being a bridge and tunnel Manhattan. There's only a certain number of ways you can get in and out. It'd be harder to do here, but London has managed to do it. But they have cameras everywhere, so their license plates are recorded and everything like that. I think that there's a lot of cities that are looking at it, and the secret to it is you plow the money back into improving transit. You improve walking, biking, and transit so that people who are financially going to be impacted, you maybe give them a break, maybe there's a rebate, but you plow that money back into improving other alternatives so that it's not just a hit on anybody who is required to drive. But I think it's just like vehicle miles traveled, dynamic tolling on roads, and a lot of other things. I think it's the wave of the future, especially for raising money for transportation in general.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think it's a very good tool. It has been very successful in other countries, as you mentioned, like in Europe. I know some of my colleagues in some cities on the West Coast are looking into it. It hasn't been very popular in the United States, again, because I think the United States has a very, culture, not to a point that there's many political support on that. But I think lots of cities in the U.S. is going to get there eventually, maybe including Madison.
Question, microphone, over here.
Hello, so I was wondering, we have seen in multiple other states and countries that connecting different cities and making transportation between different cities creates megaregions and helps the economy of the country and of the state. Do you think Wisconsin can benefit from such a connection, connecting different Wisconsin cities, and if so, how?
I'm crying because we almost had a train. Yeah, if you haven't listened to the Derailed podcast, that's still a sore spot with me because my family's in Chicago. And Minneapolis is really ticked off at us because they want to be connected to Chicago and they can't do it without going through Wisconsin. And we had the money. We're the only state that got 100% of what we asked for. We have been working on it for 20 years. Tommy Thompson was the #1 proponent of rail, between regional rail. We got 10% of all the money that was available in the entire country and we threw it away. So you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, I don't think Wisconsin is ready for that. We had the chance, and we blew it. So I can't be very sanguine that we're going to do very well. Chicago is connecting to a lot of other Midwest cities. My fear is that they're going to manage to get a rail system through northern Illinois and up the Mississippi through Iowa and Minnesota, and we're just going to be bypassed, and we're going to become a backwater.
Anybody else? Okay, all right, so where's the microphone? Over there, yes, sir.
Hi. So many of the transportation nerds in the room have heard of 20-minute cities, where it's the idea that people will happily commute 20 minutes, whether it's by walking, biking, busing, or driving. And so the question isn't how far is your commute, the question is how long is your commute. And the maps that we saw in the Madison region have all these employment destinations being built on this edge of town, and all these residential places in the center of town where Costco can't afford to go in. So what are the policies and practices that we could do to reintegrate our land uses, to bring residences to the job centers, and to bring job centers, new jobs, to where people live, and including, of course, the commercial activity of grocery stores and drugstores and shoe repair shops and all that jazz that a healthy neighborhood has. How do we take our system that has been driven through zoning into separated land uses and reintegrate the land uses in a healthy fashion so that no matter where you live, all your daily needs can be met with a 20-minute bike ride or 20-minute walk or 20-minute bus ride?
Gary, that might be your area a little bit. You want to take that one first?
Oh, it's really too hard. It's very challenging to answer that question. I think you laid it out beautifully. How do we intervene in the land use system so that we can help solve our time-space problem? I joke, it's not a very good joke, but that transportation is land use with wheels, right? We have to get around to all of our dispersed activities. Some of the tools include using so-called infill development as much as possible, right? Understanding what the barriers are to developers that keep developers from making these more compact projects, and eliminating those barriers so that we actually get to use development in a way that supports transit development, for example. That's the thorniest of all the issues. That plus housing affordability. Let's also put that on the table, because combined housing and transportation account for about 40 to 50% of a household's expenditures. And so whatever we can do to help make this system work better really affects a household's bottom line. And that's one of the most important things that we can be doing.
Yeah, great points. Actually, the city is moving forward with that. We have been making a lot of progress. We recently did our comprehensive plan. It's called UW-Madison, as many of you may heard of. So there is an element called land use and transportation. So we regularize the interrelations between land use and transportation. And one major goal of us is to encourage mixed-use development, so that everything is more integrated. There's more town center type of developments. So we don't create a lot of unnecessary travel demand. We still have a long way to go, but I think when staff reviews every development projects, the staff is putting through the development projects through those lenses.
I just want to say one of the problems that we have here in Wisconsin is that we don't actually do regional land use. Regional land use planning. We don't do regional transportation planning much either. In a lot of states, there is much more integration about, if you put this development out here, if you put this job center out here, and people don't have a way to get there, is that a smart way to do it? But we pretty much let municipalities build whatever they want. And so people will play municipalities off against each other. If you don't let me build it in Madison, I'll just go over to Middleton or Wanakee or Sun Prairie or something like that. And then they turn to the transportation people and say, fix it. You know, I got all these people on the road, fix it. Well, you know, you knew that the road was only that wide when you moved out there. So I don't know what the answer is, but the tool that we're using of accessibility goes to that. What is your travel time, and what are your travel options for getting to different destinations, both jobs and non-job destinations, schools, grocery stores, parks, pharmacies, restaurants, and things like that. And I think that we have to start thinking about how can people reach these destinations, how long does it take, and what are your options for getting there. And then we just have to say, we're not going to widen the road. We're not going to widen the road, and you're going to have to make your choice where you live and where you work, where you shop, and what time you try to travel, because we can't keep widening the road to accommodate all of that.
Okay, so we'll do 2 more questions and we're about out of time, so we got a question in the back there.
I have a question about the time frame it takes to plan for road adjustments. You know, I don't think automated cars, non-driver cars is the way it's going to go. It's going to stratify different social classes, and it's just not going to go anywhere besides being too dangerous. But I think there's going to be other modes that might be coming down the road, pun not intended. But how do you plan for adapting the roads for different modes of transportation? You know, mass transit, single occupant vehicles, and whatnot. Let me rephrase that. I see the blank stares. How much time does it take to plan for new roads or city streets? And is there enough time to adapt the roads to new forms of transportation?
Yeah, so I'll give a first crack at it. Yeah, I don't think anybody has an answer exactly how many years it takes. Actually, I don't think that anybody has an answer where they know what's coming at it now. I just wanna when I give people talks, a lot of times I start with a quote from actually Mary Barta, which is the CEO of GM. She said, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see more changes in our industry than in the past 50. That's absolutely true. But really, we know, changes are coming. We don't really know, what change are coming. We thought, driverless vehicles might be dominating in the future, which might be true, might be not. But I don't think it's going to go away. Other modes like micromobilities, they have potential revolutionary our system as well. I'm talking about the dockless scooters, bike share, and skiboards, all those kinds of things. I'm pretty sure that's more coming at us. So even though we cannot really answer what the time frame it takes for us to plan for it, but I think this is a in our profession, transportation profession, I think we have to realize it's a very challenging time, but it's also very exciting time. There are lots of disruptions coming at us, but there's lots of opportunities at us. So one thing I think it's very important that we have to stay open-minded, has to stay flexible. So when we make investments today, one thing we have to consider is that when things change, can we adapt? So where are there any things that it's for sure going to be needed in the future that we should invest now, or other things like if we make the investments now, whether we need to redo it in 20, 30 years. So I think those are good questions to ask ourselves as a transportation professional.
Well, I was just going to say that some of the answer to your question is not that complicated because paint is relatively cheap. You can put up barricades to segment different types of use. You can put up a curb to put in a bus rapid transit lane exclusively. You can do a protected bike lane with planters. You can make something that used to be a big roadway into a park space. I mean, New York City has done amazing things with a few planters, some plastic bollards, and a bunch of paint, and some tables and chairs. So some of the things are reallocating the space that we have to other uses. It's not building anything grand and new. It's just reallocating the space that we already have devoted to transportation to different types of transportation and moving people either slower or faster or in different routes or by different modes. And that's not necessarily expensive or difficult to do.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we had 20 bonus minutes of questions and discussion here tonight, so we're going to end it at this moment in time. I want to thank all of you for spending some of your evening with us here. It sounds like we could bring this topic back again sometime in the near future, because there's a lot of interest. So again, I appreciate you doing it. I know someone commented over here, I believe, is there is a lot of other forms of ways to get involved, communication, meetings, activities. If you want to come hear about what's happening in different aspects of transportation, not only at the university, the city has many opportunities, and please get involved if you have the interest. Okay? Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.